Aquino. Some people pronounce it Aquino. It's interesting. It's all over the map. But this is a small farming town in south central Italy. It's about 120 kilometers south of Rome. Today, it's still small, about 5,000, population of about 5,000. Now, why did we pick that name? Well, I'm going back several years. Like when we actually started this whole notion of putting on like tank shows, like I'm talking about not just a little demonstration like we would have on a swap meet thing, but actually putting on a show and emulating some of the War and Peace and similar type venues in Europe and in the UK. We wanted to give it a handle. So we looked at the Guidon, we looked at the battle honors of the Ontars, and we went through it. And I always thought Ortona would have been so cool. And the more I looked into it, I did a deep dive. The Ontars were there. We got a battle honor for it, but it wasn't, we were engaged on the outside of the town and we really didn't get into it in a big way. So we kept looking further, and then we saw Aquino. And I remember that some people said, I think John Richardson actually, why did you pick Aquino? We didn't win there. We lost, but there is so much character that goes to the regiment here. I mean, the fact that we were not triumphant on that day, and by the way, that day was May 19th, pretty damn close to today. Today's what, 15th, 16th, 15th. It's 4 days away. So it happened 77 years ago today, or sorry, in the 19th. And it's ironic, but it was last year in 2020 that we lost our two remaining veterans of Aquino and the Ontars. And that was, of course, John Richardson, and that was Ralph Kearney. Well, we were honored to have the two of them at several. I think John was a regular fixture at all of our Aquinos. I think he was at the last one in 19, was he not?
Yes, he was, but he wasn't really well. He was very close to 100 years old. I believe because his birthday is around where we would have Aquino, so he was 100 years old. But you know, John, he still wanted to make sure that he could stand up for the national anthem and salute and honor the veterans that didn't come home from the Second World War.
The Battle of Aquino, which took place in the spring of 1944 on the western side of Italy. The Ontario Regiment was the armored unit that was supporting the infantry in that particular battle, and everybody who's associated with this museum either served with the Ontario Regiment or is directly related in some way to that regiment.
Love it.
Welcome to the Ontario Regiment Museum, and welcome to Aquino Tank Weekend. We're not like any other museum. We bring history to life.
We have 4 veterans of the Second World War with us today, and they're going to be in vehicles that were related or specific to their service.
It's interesting to work on these vehicles, but the hours that are put in are exceptional. They do it in memory of those soldiers and in memory of what they fought for, and the fact that we are a very free society today because of that effort.
There he is there on the right. Hard to believe, huh? Look at that. You can see the Shermans in the background. I'm not sure whether that was post-war. Do they look like newer Shermans?
They look cast hall to me.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And there's one other picture that I bumped into I wanted to share with you. Go to the next one. Look at that. I'm in the right. Now you're saying, what? They're very young. What would John Richardson be doing there? Dressed like a grunt, dressed like an infantryman. You notice they have he's got the gun that you see there. The only weapon that you can see there is an infantry Mark. This is a Mark III. That one's a Mark III, and this wouldn't be a historical moment if I didn't show one to you here. This is 1918, 303 blade sight here. Look at the notable. It has a huge bayonet. Now, undoubtedly, the Ontars, as any armored regiment, you also are trained in infantry tactics, because guess what? When your tank gets blown up, you need to know what to do. So this is World War I, and this is what we had. These huge World War I bayonets on it. So just showing you this is the actual, Mark III, 303, the magazine, 8 or 10 round, I should know that, I don't know. And then they took the same gun, and here's a 1944 Mark IV. Basically, it's the same action as the First World War gun, but they just modified the nose, and it would take a smaller bayonet, or a pig sticker, as they called it. The blades are different. It's an aperture type sight. Round here without the blade. Pop up, more accurate, but same caliber, same action, same type weapon. Okay, well, enough on that. And if you recall, one more thing, that I don't see a lot of pictures of the Ontars with weapons, other than the tanks, of course. But what we had, what I assume they would have had, the officers would have had the Browning high power. And we spoke of this the other day when we spoke about the ranges. And of course, they would have had the Sten gun. There was also a type of tankers model that they would take this rear butt plate off and put on a small hand grip, so you didn't have this. It'd be easier to maneuver around inside a tank, to get in and out of the hatch if you had to. Okay, talking about Aquino. Now we have another video that's really cool, so I want to tell you some stuff that may not be covered in the video, and some very unique stories. But the Hitler line, this is Aquino. When we speak of Aquino, in 1944, Aquino, the town, was anchored at the western end of the Hitler line. And that was a line that it took them 5 months to construct. It was very well defended, and it had layers of defense in it. So here's our guys, not at Aquino, I'm sure, but here's what they would have looked like coming along. And just to give you an idea, the entire line was protected by 19-foot wide a barrier of barbed wire, mines, anti-tank ditches. All approaches were covered by mortars, machine guns, and anti-tank guns. Of special interest were 8 of the Panzerthrombs. Now, I'll have a look at that in a sec. Well, let's go to the next photo. I'm going to work my way up here. So at Aquino, there were 88s. Crazy. Go to the next one. Next picture. It was defended by, these are paratroopers, and we ran into them in Casino, and they were excellent, amazing fighters. And the German forces, it was a mix, but there was a lot of paratroopers there, and they put a lot into it. Now go to the next one. This is called the Panzer terms, or Panther terms. And at Aquino, there was 8 of these. And these were 50-foot by 50-foot cement bunkers topped with the turret of a Panther. It's a Panther tank turret there. Obviously, they were making more turrets than they had chassis, or they wouldn't have been setting these things up. But think about it. High velocity, 75 millimeter gun, and you've got it so low, almost like a hull down, and there's no hull to shoot. And you've got all the armor on this thing. It's very, very formidable. And each of these was supported by a minimum of 3 anti-tank guns and a number of machine guns all around. And of course, the field of fire arced, so they could actually cover each other. There were also over 70 self-propelled guns. Now, what would that be? No, that would be like a Martyr. This is 44. I don't think there was Hetzers there, but there would have been Martyrs. There would have been Stugs also. And the entire line was supported by the 9th Panzer Battalion. That was a mix of things. So, next picture. There's what that looks like embedded. They're gonna talk more about this in the video, so I'm not gonna dwell on it. To give you an idea, go to the next picture again. Okay, there's another view of it. Just incredible. Cheaper to than building a tank. And these things could be shipped fairly easily on rail. There's all kinds of pictures of them on rails, but I wasn't going to get into that whole thing. So on May 19th, the day of the Battle of Aquino, in 44, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Purves, is it Purves or Purves? Do we know, Jeremy?
The pronunciation exactly, I'm not the best person to ask. Yeah.
Okay.
Purves, yeah.
Purves, okay. We were in camp. The Ontars were in camp just south of Aquino. We were tasked with supporting the British 26th Armored Brigade. The 26th was to sweep through Aquino and then hook behind the German lines. The Ontars were then directly to support the British 30th Infantry Brigade in exploiting the gap once we broke through. We tried to roll through on their eastern flank. So the regiment reached the edge just prior to. The game plan was obviously to attack and do a swing around their left flank. The regiment reached the edge of the airport at 2 a.m. It was pitch dark on May 19th. Lieutenant Colonel Purves reported to the command post of the 5th Battalion, and that's the 5th Buffs, Buffs. So I'm thinking, well, what's Buffs? Well, it's the Royal East Kent Regiment, known as the 5th Buffs, where the acting commanding officer was there. He was explaining his plans. So the fog still blanketed the valley when the tanks moved out at 5 a.m. Through the murk of the early light came the flash of exploding shells. So at 5 a.m., the barrage, our artillery, opened up on the German lines. We wanted to soften them up before we attacked. The heavy fog continued to limit visibility to an extent that it actually delayed the initial advance. At 7 a.m., the advance had begun, but had not reached the cemetery. So the tanks moved forward to within 300 yards of Aquino, and the pillbox gun was a mere stone's throw away. I'm reading from the history of the Ontario Regiment, 1951. Although each tank engaged by the gun was hit at least twice, the crews remained at their posts and returned shot for shot until they were in danger of being brewed up. All but one man of the crews escaped safely in spite of the heavy fire. As the morning warmed up, the fog lifted. The supporting artillery's supply of smoke shells was running low. A smoke screen which had protected the right flank from observation to the north was thinning out. The entire force, infantry and tanks, was coming under direct fire, observed fire from a higher ground towards this other location, a second troop from B Squadron flanked the cemetery and moved within 300 yards of Aquino. The troop was engaged by an anti-tank gun, but the gun was destroyed. Immediately, all three tanks of the troop were taken under fire by a camouflage, a bunker with an 88 millimeter. All three tanks were repeatedly hit, but continued to shoot at the 88 until the tanks caught fire. All of the crew members escaped with the exception of Trooper Jack Phillips, who was never seen again. Just before 9 o'clock, the commanding officer and the signals section of the 5th Buffs was engaged by mortars, and the universal carriers they were riding in was destroyed. This meant that the Ontario Regiment tanks could not communicate with the infantry that they were supposed to support. So the rest of it, like it's 2 more B Squadron tanks were knocked out at 9:30. The squadron commander, Major Millen, was critically wounded when a sniper and a shell splinter struck him almost at the same time. We have something to share with that, Jeremy.
Yeah, we actually, in the museum, and it's pretty amazing. Some of you guys may have walked by this so many times. This is actually, there you go.
There we go.
That's some damage right there.
Yeah,
That is some damage.
Henry Millen's helmet. It's in our museum in the World War II display. It has the damage there that he received while this was on his head.
You see the shell going in and then it coming out. Now, they said he was struck simultaneously by a shell fragment and a sniper. He wasn't struck in the head, like he probably took a body wound for one of the two. But I don't know whether that's pretty big. I would almost say that's that was probably shell shrapnel there, I'm guessing. You wouldn't think a sniper's bullet would leave that kind of hole. And he survived the war.
Yeah, he did survive the war. Major Millen went on, after his ordeal, went on to a successful career after the war, running the Oshawa Business School and later Millen Real Estate. Due to the head injuries he suffered, he walked with a cane the rest of his life. And he remained a part of the regimental family. He served as honorary lieutenant colonel from 1970 to 1976.
Amazing. He was critically wounded, it says, and Captain Hawkins took command and fought valiantly to prevent a counterattack on the flank of the badly battered force. The tanks were not taking their drubbing without fighting back. They were accounting for I love the verbiage in some of this, they were accounting for a goodly number of enemy guns and crews, but they were pitted against tremendous odds. Just amazing. I'm still amazed at that helmet. Do we have it? That was there. That happened. It was crazy. So it says it must be appreciated whenever the regiment is mentioned in action or out through hell and glory, the 392nd Battery is included, an artillery unit. As in every other action from Artona on that memorable day in Aquino, it was the 392nd Battery who toiled from dawn till dark to smoke that right flank, or when the smoke ran thin, they shelled and shelled. So you realize we were stuck out there on that airport field, tanks being devastated, and the artillery, they're always there. They put the initial barrage against the enemy, and then they were there to give backup. So when the smoke shells ran thin, they kept shelling them with high explosives just to keep it. It says here, shelled and shelled to keep the enemy from loosing a slaughter on our lads. That was quote, end quote. This ungrudging tribute may well be left to speak for itself. They went on and on. another, I'll come back to that in a moment, but here's one of the many unsung heroes of the Aquino Airport was Padre Smith's driver, Trooper Westover. They all called him Westy. Through dust and death of the battle, he drove his Jeep back and forth from the airport, from the battle, right on the battlefield, to the regimental aid post, evacuating the wounded tankers and infantry. When he finally reported to the A echelon area, he was crying like a child. Captain Harold, the quartermaster, saw the boy, went over, put his arm around him and said, what's the matter, Westy? He says, I don't know. And he just kept crying. But this guy had been working for the last 3 days, it said, with nothing more than a cup of tea to keep him going. It was estimated that he brought back nearly 180 men out of the inferno at that airport. So talk about heroism, just incredible. The Ontarios tell one about Westy and Padre Smith. In their Jeep, they were tooling along towards the front lines when a British MP stopped them and said, if you go forward, sir, you'll come under fire, warned the military policeman. With a haughty stare at his informant, Padre Smith directed, drive on, I'm on the Lord's side, and into it he went. So you can imagine a lot of mess talk and congratulatory stuff, and you know what I mean, talk over a beer and stuff. This is what it went. And the last note I want to make, because we do have a short video here on the battle and an interview with John Richardson that was in this program. One of the many daring feats at Aquino was that of Sergeant Ken Breathwaite and Trooper Turcotte. When the 392nd Battery began to run out of smoke shells, the sergeant and trooper drove a carrier, this is an Ontar, drove a carrier back to the nearest supply dump, picked up a load of smoke canisters, and tore back to the airport, running a wide circle in front of the tanks, between the tanks and the guns. They were igniting canisters of smoke grenades and throwing them out, just to give, for a few more minutes to sustain the smoke screen to protect the Ontars and their fellow troopers from getting decimated. So on that note, I just want to tell you some stuff that maybe the film wouldn't cover. Just amazing examples of heroism. And I mean, we didn't know they were going to be there. And those Panther Trums, those Panther turrets that were put in those casings, that was the first time that any allies were ever exposed to it. We were the first ones, unfortunately, to actually come up against them. So let's show that next video.
The Canadian victory at Ortona is bittersweet, as Allied command decides the best way to seize Rome lies further west. The new route of their advance is straight through the Leary Valley, one of the most heavily defended positions on the Germans' infamous Hitler Line. Allied intelligence reports an undefended gap in the line near an abandoned airport outside the village of Aquino. But their intelligence couldn't be more wrong.
We started out across the airport about, we must have done about 5:30, 6 o'clock. The fog was dense. I mean, it's so dense. I mean, you couldn't see 30 feet in front of you. I was practically touching the tank ahead of me. I couldn't even see it. It was that dense. About halfway, the sun came out and they disintegrated that lovely fog that was covering us. And we went right straight across the airport, not knowing what they had sitting there waiting for us. And then, of course, all hell broke loose.
The Canadian tanks have just stumbled into an ambush. 4 of Germany's deadly accurate new anti-tank weapons. The powerful and very lethal Panther term. May 19th, 1944. Canadian tanks and infantry are now less than 150 kilometers from Rome. If they can break through German defenses at Aquino, very little stands in their way. But as they cross an abandoned airport outside the village, they encounter a deadly surprise.
And we went right straight across the airport, not knowing what they had sitting there waiting for us. And then, of course, all hell broke loose.
The Canadians are among the first to encounter the Germans' newest anti-tank weapon. The Pantherturm is a Panther turret mounted on a concrete base. Its low profile and heavy armor make it almost impossible to destroy. And its high-velocity 75mm gun makes it extremely dangerous.
Their guns were pretty rough. This is long barrel 75, same turret and everything as a Panther tank. That was a rude awakening because we didn't even know they were there. So we played a game of ducks that day, and we were the ducks, and the Germans had fun being the hunters. All these guns were intermingled, each supporting each other. So if you got to one, the other guy would be shooting at you too. We got across there in one piece, right across in front of those guns. And I still had my troop intact. I didn't go very far till I found this nice, comfortable spot. It was kind of a hole. I got my two tanks down into it, and I was kind of on the rim. Had I gone on, I would have gone right into that 75mm. I wouldn't be here today, there's no doubt in my mind. He'd blown my 3 tanks all day long. We lost about 13 tanks that day. The only thing we could do is call on smoke to smoke those guns out. Around 8 o'clock, we got a good stonk of smoke came in, and finally we got off there before it got dark and got off the airport.
Unable to get past the Pantherturms at Aquino, the Canadians finally breached the Hitler line further west.
So that captures some of the excitement we hear from John Richardson. I mean, he was there. It's kind of cool to see him. You know what I mean? Sad when he makes the comment that all his friends are gone, you know, and stuff like that. But I mean, that's inevitable. Anyways, you know, I think, yeah, we lost. I hear 12, I hear 13 Shermans during that. I think he mentioned 13 in the video, and you read about 12, but either way, we definitely, we got faced, we were surprised, we were hit. There was no winning in a situation like that, but it's how you cope with it. And it's the people stepping up to the plate to deal with it and move on. And they recovered. I mean, look at the number of people. I mean, the number of wounded. I had no idea. You know, they said there was no losses, and you know, I'd heard that. Yet then you read from the history that there was a guy missing out of the tank. He was never heard from, never found again. So who knows? Who knows? But there was a lot of the officers and other men were shot and wounded and had to be taken off. So they, after that, went back, I think it was a week and a half maybe, and they regrouped and they had to repair and that kind of stuff and take care and change their structure because a lot of their officer corps were killed or wounded, or I should say wounded, more so wounded. But anyways, I just wanted to go back and look at it again. And Aquino, talk to John, get your t-shirt.